Hey people, I've got a 1.4 Cruze engine. This is the big block, the 1.4 with the turbo. Now this engine was running, but it was running quite badly. Heaps of blow-by, heaps of exhaust smoke. It has been recently fitted with a new turbo. I can also spot a new oil cooler on here, so they're positives. Who knows what the rest of it's like. Had super low compression, so we're gonna rip it down and have a look inside. Now, to make it easy for myself, I just want to get this flex plate off so I can sit it on an engine stand, because nothing's worse when they're rocking around like this all the time. Okay, we've got six bolts out of the flex plate. Hey, let's have a close look here. Rear main seal. Look, there's a little bit of wetness there. It's not terrible, but not 100% certain if it's come from this Sump seal here, because it's pretty juicy. But definitely looks like that's a little bit damp in there as well. But hey, look, we're putting new seals in it. But let's get it on an engine stand. So after a bit of stuffing around here and not being able to find the right size bolts, we've rigged something up. Let's just tighten this all down. Okay, I'm going to start by removing the turbo, but before we get there, let's get rid of this catalytic converter. Now, looking at mine, if we look in here, looks like I would say when the turbo's been replaced, that's been cut. They've obviously had some issues. Normally a bolt in there, it's much like this one here. So let's zip this one off. Now this is usually held captive with these little brackets. This was a bit chewed up in there. We'll make sure that's nice before we put it back on. Next, I want to take this band off here that holds this catalytic converter to the turbo. And it looks like this band just needs a little bit of persuasion. Bink. Pull that out of the way. This can move. And I'm just looking in here, it's super oily in here. Now that could have been from the old turbo, it could be from this turbo. Who knows? It does look like a fairly new sort of gasket in here. It does look all fairly recently done. Looking in here, you can see that the converter material is still all right in there. It hasn't all broken away. That's a good sign, but this is pretty gnarly in here. We'll see what we can do to tidy that up. And we'll get this cover plate here off. This one appears to be missing a bolt that goes in here. I'm not going to quote too many of the sizes for some of these bolts because it looks like some of them are a bit random. And we've got some nice new nuts on here, some new, some old. So someone has spent a little bit of money on this. So just going to get some of this simple pipe work out of the way. So there's a little, let's pull this little one off the bottom. This one here, there's a little squeeze point on the side. And again, these all look pretty new. There's a hose that comes out of the thermostat housing and just heads down under here. It's much easier if this hose isn't here to get into a bolt at the back. So let's just zip this one out. And still got coolant in it as expected. Also just going to remove this thermostat housing. And again, things in here are looking fairly clean and tidy. It's certainly not a new thermostat. I can see that the seal is really still quite compressed, but it's definitely been running cool and not just running water in there, so that's a good thing. Now, to give myself heaps of room for the next job, I'm going to remove this bracket that supports the aircon. It was missing a bolt there already. So one down. Those two out. Now in underneath the turbo here you have a line that comes down into this 17mm bolt. It's super hard to do this one when you're in the car and you've got stuff around. Look, it's pretty easy while it's all exposed now. And of course we're going to get some coolant coming out. So this is the coolant that's just still all in the block. And that coolant's a good colour, so that's a good sign that not everything's bad. Now this does have some washers that sit on either side of it. Make sure it's not stuck onto the block. We'll check those out a bit later when we can get the turbo right out. Hey, so coming out of the turbo we have the oil drain back tube here. So that returns the oil to the sump. Now there's often a plastic fitting in here that's really fragile and breaks easily. So rather than playing around with that, the easier thing to do is just to take these two bolts off here from the base of the turbo. So I'm going to undo those and then that way we can just pull the turbo off and leave this in place, and we can pull it out in a moment. Slip these ones out. Now with these two bolts out of the way, I can just take this little gasket out of the way. Now I might be able to slide this one up out of the sump already. We'll have a try. Yep, so that's that little plastic fitting that I was saying often causes dramas. Look, it's got a double O-ring set up here. Look, they leak all the time. So look, we'll give that some extra attention when we put that back together. Okay, so next I want to undo all of these nuts to take this manifold off, but there's one straight in behind there and this oil feed gets in the way. So we're going to zip it out of the way first. So just be careful when this one comes off, because we've got a terrible looking seal under here for what should be a brand new turbo. We'll take the seal out that's underneath that as well. And again, it looks like that is an old one, even though the turbo is new. So we'll set that on there. Now that turbo feed comes in behind here and up onto here, so we're just going to zip that off as well. Wiggle that out. This is a super common point where they leak. Okay, it's got some nice new O-rings there, so it's interesting. There's some new O-rings and there's some old ones. Now I'm going to use a 10mm socket with a thin, small extension, just so I can kind of get into this. And then look, I've got it expanded out because I'm going to hit it with a ratchet. Let's see how we go. First one. Second one, and I'm dropping them everywhere, but we'll pick them up later. Now look, I could remove this, but I'm able to slip this socket and extension in there. Grab it out. Look, that one's come out with the entire stud, that's not a problem. Same too with that one. Now pulling this out, I got a collection of some new ones. I've got some old ones. Perhaps they didn't use the new ones because they came out on the studs. I've got a couple old ones here. Nice mix. Now we have one more cooling hose here. So we'll just zip it off from here. And this pipe's also attached down with this Torx bolt here. Why am I doing that by hand? Let's zip that off. There's a special little bracket that sits over the turbo here, and you can kind of slide it out like this. We'll just get it out of the way. It's this sort of plate. Now our turbo should just come off. Okay, let's just have a quick look at this turbo. Definitely looks very new. Got no concerns about it being new. Well, actually, it looks like an old hose. So that looks like it's an old hose that's been reused, hence maybe all that old coolant that's been leaking there. Now these are super prone to cracking, but obviously being this new, I shouldn't expect any cracks. Let's get that out of the way. But it is very, well, it's actually quite gummy in here. The oil doesn't feel like oil at all. It actually just feels quite thick and like grease. So we'll have a closer look at that in a little bit. I'm just trying to have a little look in that oil feed. Yeah, it's got some oil in there, but it's a bit crappy looking in there. Could just be some dirty oil, a bit hard to tell. Obviously too, we've got the gasket. But even this gasket's so oily looking, so who knows? Having a look down into the ports. Look, they are very sooty, all of them. But you know, if it hasn't been running well prior to that new turbo, that can be expected. So while we're still at the front here, we might as well just remove this oil cooler assembly and oil filter assembly. Before I pull it off, I'm just going to take the cap off and just have a look if there's, see what sort of filters in here. Might give me an indication of how long it's been running. So look, that filter's not brand new. So it's definitely run for a little bit, but I'm not seeing anything dangerous in there. Set that back on. Yeah, we've got a couple of bolts here to zip this oil cooler out of the way. Slide this hose out. I did not expect to see a nice big bright blue seal there. Interesting. Let's just run that little bolt back in place. These few off. Give it a little wiggle. It's just the three. And we're getting a bit of oil running out, as we would expect. Look, that's looking nice and clean in there. It certainly is quite a new and fresh oil cooler. Just sit that somewhere to drain. So at that point, this is pretty well the front of this engine teared down. We're going to flip it over and we will now start doing the other side. Okay, so I pulled the turbo off the front. I just want to get the intake manifold off the back here. So we've got a little clip. Just take this vent off. We've got another little pipe that comes in, that just sits in on the back of the intake here. It does actually have a squeeze point, but I just popped it off anyway. Get that out of the way. Actually, before I do that, it is important to note down in here, there is a little diaphragm sort of rubber, and they start perishing. This actually looks like a fairly new hose, but Look, we'll check that out before we put it back together. Now we've got some bolts down in here. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them by the looks of it. Just pull that out. Oh. And it's dripping a lot of oil as well, so no doubt that's where a lot of the smoking was coming from. We'll drain that out and see how we go. There is a little diaphragm up in here as well that we'll need to check later to see if it's still there. Otherwise we'll throw this away and just buy another one. Or you can get a modification kit that changes everything. So let's get this out of the way. Put it somewhere where I can drain it. Now just looking in here, these ports look pretty clean, but look, they have a lot of fuel going in them. Definitely there's some silicone on this here. This is looking pretty gross in around here. Looks like it's pretty messed up in here. That's actually a crankcase ventilation hole there. There's a lot of silicone and junk in there. Okay, we'll keep moving on. We've got a coil here with a couple of different bolts. Pull that up and out of the way. We'll try and find the proper bolts for that. It's looking pretty old, but look, if it's still performing, I'd keep it. Otherwise they're pretty cheap and you can throw a new one in. Okay, we've just rotated that to get a better view. You can see the plugs are still in there. Let's remove this cover. Get the dipstick out of the way because the dipstick sits in the top of the cover. I think I've got all those bolts. Pop that out. I always like to have a look in here. Look, it's actually looking pretty clean in here. Yeah, surprisingly so. And the gasket's looking pretty fresh, so I'd say it's actually a fairly new cover, just as a guess, because I didn't expect it to look that clean, but let's see what we can see in here. So first thoughts in here, it's actually a very clean looking engine in here. Look, it's obviously being kept up with a bit of maintenance. There's no real discernible wear on these cam lobes. The top of the chain's tied up on here. All the little rockers look like they're in place. From what I'm seeing there, I'm actually fairly impressed with things. Let's keep moving on. So definitely someone's been doing some work at some point on this, which is great because it means it's probably had some maintenance. Let's keep moving on. Just going to take this tensioner off next. Take these 2 bolts off for the alternator. Now what I like to do with these is just run these bolts back in just a few threads or more. Give them a good tap. Not too hard. Now we'll run them out again. And I can pull these out. Now what that does is these little, I don't know, collars or whatever you do, whatever you want to call them, when you tighten them up, they get pulled in and they really hold the alternator firmly in place. Just tapping them back makes it easy to sort of slide it back in, slide it back out. So that'll just help me out later on. Okay, I'm going to zip this water pump off next, but I need to take this pulley. If you've got an impact, look, 9 times out of 10, you're just going to hit it and that bolt will come straight out. Here's a little tip: if you don't have an impact, grab the belt, just some sort of big spanner or something like this. Just see if you can get the belt held. It's going to want to wind a little bit, but you can get to a point where it'll lock itself. Again, let's do it here. And look, once you've broken the tension on them, they'll just run out easily. But hey, little trick if you get stuck. But I don't generally have time for those sorts of things, so I'll zip them off. Now we've got our water pump here. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I don't know. I've got 9, 10. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's about 10 of them. On such a small water pump. And zip these off. Another one up here. Now I've left all the bolts in their position rather than popping them out. That way, because I reckon there's going to be some long ones and some short ones. Just finding a nice location just to crack the seal. Pull that off. Let's have a little look in there. Look, minimal corrosion or anything in there, so again, that actually is looking pretty neat and tidy in there. That's what I like to see. And it looks relatively like a fairly fresh looking gasket, so I don't know how long ago. It certainly doesn't look genuine, so I've got some numbers in here. No, look, it does say GM on it, so it is a genuine gasket, but that looks good. Look, I'm not terribly worried about the timing and stuff like that. I'm just going to zip it all apart. Let's get these couple off. I just don't want to put too much pressure on the actual connector here in terms of getting it off. So just looking if I can just squeeze a screwdriver just into this little space here and just see if I can get it to move. Let's try this one. That's it. Once it moves, we should be able to wiggle it out. Okay, now they run a seal. Whoa, where's the seal? Still up in here. So they run a seal around there like that. This seal feels actually really quite hard and brittle. And that's a little pin there that will actuate the variable valve timing that's initiated by that signal from there. Look, once it starts to just move a little bit, it just starts to come free. Again, there's a seal. This one's got a nice dab of silicone all the way around. Okay, I'm going to pull this cover off. There's a couple of bolts in here and these sensors get right in the way, so we'll zip those out of the way. Sometimes you pull these out and they're covered in oil build-up and crud and stuff. This is looking really quite clean. We've also got a couple of bolts that come up from the sump into this cover as well, so we'll grab those just while we're here. So these look like they're all the same length at the moment, so let's zip these all out. That's all of them up there, way down there and there. Now there's two bigger ones just in here. We're certainly not going to mix those two up, they're significantly bigger. Okay, we do have this bolt right in the middle, which is a coolant drain, I believe. It's 11 mil just to mix things up. There's probably not much coolant left in here, but let's see what we get. Yep. like we expect to dry, but obviously this is a source of leaks as well. I'm just going to sit it back in there loosely. Okay, with all those bolts removed, this cover should now come out of place. Just giving it a little light tap, little edge there. Little edge there. Don't be tempted to lever it off these pickup points here. You're going to run into issues later on. Okay, so we've got it loose. Let's just wiggle it off and pull it out. So what we've got in here, look, it's got some varnish and stuff in it. You'd expect that, but other than that, look, it's a used cover. I'm not seeing anything there that's scary or worrying. Okay, so in here we've now obviously got the timing chain set up. We've got the tensioner here on this side. You can lock these open and work with it with some of the cover still open through an access hole. Not a big deal for me for what I'm doing. Let's keep removing some parts from here. I'm just going to literally pull it out like this. It will kind of pop out of place because it's got a bit of tension on it. So there's your tensioner, nice big spring in there. Just set that aside like that. Okay, just looking at this first guide here, there's a little Torx bit down in here to support it. Zip it out. Now just note it is housed in this sort of little funky container, so it's not really an interchangeable one. Let's pull that away. Okay, looking at this, and this is obviously the tensioner side, so this is going to run fairly tight onto here. And you can see a little bit of wear on there. You can, don't know if the camera can pick that up. There is definitely a channel where the chain has been running. But look, it's not excessive wear. Now look, I should mention too that at this point, these cams may try and just spin a little bit just to sit in a natural position. Hey, depending on where they're sitting, you don't ever want them to bump in together or whatever, but hey look, I'm just zipping this engine down. Not too stressed about using it again. I'm just going to be using it for some parts, I guess. It's the cam just flicking a little bit. And again, let's have a look at this one for wear. Wipe off. Look, it's got a couple of marks. You can definitely see it's been used, but certainly doesn't have the same level of wear that the other side does, which is what you'd expect, because it's pretty well just running straight down there. And this side's your tension side. Just on the top here between these two chains, there's another sort of plastic guide. It's got a couple of screws in on this side. Again, looking at that, definitely again used. You can see the oil hole is still clear there. Put that one aside. Now, depending if these cams have moved much, you might just need to just rotate it just a little bit, just so you can get the slack on your chain where you want it. We'll just hook it off. There's our chain. Now, if you're just replacing the head, you can leave a lot of this in place, and if you have a look at this gasket here, it does have a point where it can be easily broken and rejoined, but looking at this one, you can see that gasket hasn't been snapped there. It's all still one piece. So let me just see if I can pry it away without breaking things too much. Obviously, I'm not reusing this gasket, but I'm just trying to pull it off without breaking it, that's it. So we can see here, there's actually a point where you can snap this gasket. Then we cut it there. I'm just going to rip it for now. So if you're just replacing the head, you can actually leave that one in place and just use that portion of it there. Look, it's a funky way to get away with just doing the head on this rather than pulling all this cover off, and it can save a lot of time. Typically, if the head's gone, it's probably overheated, something like that. This gasket's probably not in great condition anyway, so I would always just suggest just rip the whole thing, the whole side off. Check all your timing chains properly rather than just trying to do it through the access holes. But that's how that works. And obviously here now we can see there's the block, there's the head. I'm going to leave all these cams and stuff in place because things here are looking a lot better than I thought. And if I pull these ends off, I'm going to have to replace some bolts and stuff in here. So I'm going to leave that, but I am going to zip this cover off on the side just because it's plastic and I don't want to risk breaking it. It's just that water outlet there. It's just a coolant outlet, I should say, not water. Now, I was a bit lazy before and I didn't time it to the correct position to remove. If I had of these little notches here, would have lined up with these bolt holes just to make it easier to get my socket on. But look, I can get my socket in there comfortably anyway, so no dramas for me. Now, I didn't bother to look up the sequence for these, but I'm just going to do a bit of a spiral pattern starting from the outside, and I'm just going to crack them a little bit first. Oh, they're tight. So we'll just spiral my way around, working towards the inside. So I'm just going to keep going around and just crack these open just a little bit. If you do them all at once, you can warp things a bit. Second time around. Pretty well with this time around, I can feel I'm pretty well loosening them, but there's not much tension left on them. Now that I've loosened them all, I'm just going to zip them all out with an impact. Note the tension's been taken off, don't stress. Just see if I can pull these up and out. They'll just get in the way when we go to lift the head off otherwise. Now, I had a bit of problem off camera with one of them. The power of editing, you didn't see that drama. But look, I just had to knock one of my, what are they, an E12 socket on with a hammer and got that off because I rounded it off a little bit. We won't talk about that. Okay, big mistake for me. I forgot there's two other bolts just in here. They should have been undone at the same time, so whoopsie. Maybe I should look at the tightening and untightening sequence so that I don't stuff up like that again. Okay, now with all of those undone, I do like to sometimes just see if there's a little point that I can just lever it up a bit, just so I know it's free. I can't see too much. There we go. There's a, just to break that seal, it just makes it a bit easy when you go to lift it off. Hey, now they're pretty small heads, so they're not super heavy. It's just sticking on the gasket a bit there. Okay, first look inside the alien planet. What do we got? Gasket. Look, it's not blown out or anything, but it definitely is a used gasket, isn't it? We'll throw that one away. So at this point here, I just want to have a little look at the condition of the bores, tops of the pistons, etc., etc. It looks pretty blacky all in here. Let's just rotate this around. Just give it a bit of a wipe over so we can have a good look at things. There's no major bore damage that I can see. Feels like a fair bit of movement in on those pistons. That's not always a good guide. far from a compression test, but it does hold a fair, and look, you can see the circle on my hand. Let's have a look. As I'm doing this, it's not by any means a compression test, but it does actually hold a little bit of pressure there, not a lot. That one actually feels a whole lot higher than the others. It actually springs the engine back up. Let's try this one. That one's actually feeling quite low compared to the others, so look, it's a rough way to have a bit of a guide. No, it just looks like carbon on there. So what I'm looking for is the reason why we would have just had so much blow-by. If you remember that first footage, there was a lot of combustion gas escaping into the crankcase. Okay, having a look at the underside of the cylinder head here, that one's looking better than the other three. These are super oily and choked up and carboned up, which is not a good sign at all. I am just looking in here, just trying to determine if that's a crack or just a little build-up of carbon. That's actually looking like a little crack in the head there. Don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up. I'll try and get in nice and close. So just across here, it looks like we have a bit of a crack. Now that I've scratched it and cleaned it, it's actually harder to see. It appears at this point that I do have a crack between these two exhaust valves. Okay, so I'm going to continue stripping this down. So we're going to get the sump out. Now my amazing bolts here are going to be an issue when I rotate it around, but we'll see what happens. We can get it to there, so that's reasonable. Obviously I'm getting the last of the oil and stuff dripping out of it, hence the reason I've got a bit of cardboard there. I'm just going to zip these off. There's a couple sneaky ones down in there. Okay, a little trick. I've just got a deep socket here. It is a 8mm. It fits nicely on those Torx bits. So you can reach in and grab these ones. There's a little point here that I can just get a screwdriver in and just peel that apart. There's a bit on this side as well. No, we're just doing it from this side by the looks of it. Just peel that up. Okay, we've got a sump with plenty of sludgy, yucky looking oil. That's pretty typical. Okay, we'll just take off this little tinware here. Just come away. Those bolts there. Okay, just going to do these bolts here. That off. Now if we look at that bearing in there, look, it's not destroyed, but certainly well used. The crank feels okay, like it's not catching my fingernail on it. Just need a screwdriver just to push it that last little bit of the way. And that's one of our pistons. So just having a little look at the condition here. Look, it's not terrible for a used piston. Looking at that oil control ring, it's still free, so that's a pretty good sign. But I'd just say it's lost a lot of its tension. It's looking pretty loose in there. So we'll pop the rest out, have a look at them, and report back. Well, if the piston wasn't damaged before, it probably is now. So what's that one? That's piston number, going for that in, that's number 2. And again, no obvious cracks or damage, but definitely these oil control rings look a bit gummed up. It's interesting to notice that the gap on them is pretty well lined up, because when you put them in, you try not to have those gaps lined up that much. But I'm assuming they rotate as the engine goes. But to me, it just looks like these rings here have just lost all their tension. Okay, so this is pretty well the mess of parts that's just come off. Obviously we've got the pistons that have come off, the head, which is going to need serious looking at, and just a range of the rest of the parts as we go. Obviously the water bottle didn't go in the engine. And look, I've left them out here pretty well in the order that I've removed them. So you can kind of see a collection of parts there. Now look, my intention with this is, over on this table here, I genuinely don't know where it came from, but I have a machine cylinder head. It's been crack tested, pressure tested, whatever else. It is a used head, but it's been skimmed, ready to go. We have this great little block here. It's all cleaned up, ready to go. It is second hand. So look, it's a bit grungy down in the sump, so we'll pull the sump off. We've got a full range of gaskets here to go back in. So I'm just going to, between the two of these engines, there's the old parts from this other engine. Who knows where they came from? I must have stripped an engine down years ago and sat it in a box in the corner. So we're going to use that, plus these parts over here, to fix this car up that's up on the hoist, and hopefully the next day or two we'll drop the engine in and give it a run and see how we go. Hey, look, thanks for watching. Any comments, questions, queries about any of this stuff, just let me know and I'll see if I can answer them.